All right, welcome back to another episode of the Department of Peace. Jessica Courtney back on the podcast today. We're going to continue our series on resistance training. So we've done a couple of episodes. We did an episode on strength training because the world is heavy and we want to be able to carry it well. We did an episode on nutrition, talking about the various things that we nourish ourselves on and nourish each other on. And today we want to talk about rest. Part of the overall structure for how we get better at something or how we get stronger at something or how we improve is this idea of like a stress and then an adaptation. And I think it feels like there's a fair amount of society that's lost one or both of that formula. So today we want to talk about rest and recovery, but we want to talk about it in the context of stress, recovery, and adaptation. Not just rest for the sake of just having a justification to rest, but like in the context of what we do here, which is training to make more peace in our own hearts, in the world around us, and in the world at large. So, what does that make you? I don't know. What are your thoughts about that as we get started today?
I think my first thought about rest is this is my favorite above nutrition and resistance training. I have come, and I used to hate it, but I have come to really love and understand the importance of rest for the sake of recovery. Whether it's at the gym or just trying to do this thing we call peacemaking, rest is so important. And the thing that I didn't understand about rest during some time periods when I think we needed it most is how individual it is. I bought into this idea of self-care that was like, go get your nails done, go to the spa. It was like a whole nother chore to rest. And it wasn't until I figured out like exactly what I need for rest to actually like replenish me and help get me prepared to move forward that I could really appreciate what it did because it finally started working.
I think I probably framed this up wrong a little bit. The word that I feel like we should be using is recovery. And then recovery has some different elements to it. One of those elements is rest.
That's good.
One of those elements is nutrition. And we are primarily talking about our bodies right now. Like I've already made some metaphorical references and likely will continue to do that. But because part of what we're always doing here at Department of Peace is trying to address our inner life and our outer life, our thought life, spiritual life, and our bodily and communal collective life. So we're never really looking to divide us up into one or the other, which I think is what we see a lot of in the world, like only addressing the inner or the spiritual life to the neglect of the body or outer life. We see that in individuals and self-care and personal stuff and personal growth. We also see that in the life of communities and collectives that we get so caught up in our ideology, but we don't do anything with it, or we get so caught up in our doing that we don't know how to like just be well together. So we're always looking to bring those things together. I want to reframe it as recovery, and then we can look at any component parts under it. One of the things I love, I think part of what you're saying here is that recovery implies rest. You can just rest. Like rest is just a thing. Recovery implies that you're recovering from something. And it might imply, at least in our case, what we mean is that you're recovering for something.
Yes, the recovery for something is so important, which is why another R word that I keep thinking about is restoration, because that's how I think about my recovery time, is that it is restoring. I'm restoring up for what's to come. You know, it's not an end of itself, but it's in preparation for something else. And if you are a busy mom and wife like me, maybe you're an executive somewhere or your work is super demanding, this makes the rest recovery side of it make more sense to our brains. It's like, I'm not just checking out of the world because I need to check out of the world. I rarely think that I need to check out of the world, but what I know I need is I need to restore up myself. And I said in a couple of episodes back, like how I've been constantly feeling resourced lately. Like I feel so much more resourced than I've ever known how to do for myself. And now I find that I'm the place I go to for that restoration, which is, maybe that sounds,
that's interesting,
at odds with itself, but I have just come to learn so much more about myself that I know what I need, and it thrills me to meet my own needs for that restoration.
When I first started down the road of resistance training, strength training, weightlifting, it was fun. It was exhilarating. Like I was learning new skills. You can see your body changing pretty quickly in the early days, especially. And in my case, I was very explicitly trying to cope with some external pressures and stresses and things like that. So being in the gym and just moving and being active, really, in a lot of ways, for the first time in my life, at least with any intention, it was a way of recovering from the outside stressors of the world, but then it was its own stress on the body that would then demand some kind of additional recovery from the gym. I didn't really understand that cycle. I didn't understand the dynamics of that yet because I didn't have anything to compare it to. I was 42 or whatever when I started this, which it's never too late, if that's proof of anything. But I just didn't have anything to compare it to. I didn't have any mentors or guides or coaches or anything. And so I thought being physically sore was like
the goal.
Well, that's a good point. I guess the thing I was thinking to say was like, it just had to happen. Like you just had to be sore. Like you couldn't possibly have an effective workout and leave and not be sore. And so, yeah, then I think somewhere along the way, it's like, oh, it's the goal to be sore because that's the only way you can have an effective workout. And I would come to understand in time that if your goal is to like grow either strength or muscle, there's what some people call like a minimally effective dose. Like for things that you have your control over, how much weight you lift, all that kind of stuff. Like you want to go up right up to the line of what's going to be effective and just do that. Don't do more. Don't do a lot more for sure. And don't do way too much because it's going to make you so sore, so stressed out in your body physically, literally tear your muscles to such a point that you won't be able to recover in time, no matter how much you eat or how much you sleep or whatever, you won't be able to recover in time for your next workout. And so then you miss your next workout, or you just go kind of 50% or whatever in your next workout because you haven't been able to recover in time. And so now over the course of 2 workouts or 3 workouts, you end up giving yourself less stress than you would otherwise give because you didn't pace it out over time and you couldn't recover appropriately over time.
So it sounds like an important step in recovery is knowing your limits.
Yeah. Which unfortunately means you have to push your limits. You need to, I think, in my experience and just now taking on the input and coaching and stuff of others, curriculum and whatnot of others, you do have to figure out what you can handle. You do have to figure out what your body, what your mind, what your willpower can handle. You have to hurt on some level here and there.
Yeah.
So that you can get a sense of your boundaries and your capabilities. And then you can like dial in and recalibrate from there. And I don't think this is only true for the gym. I think it really does end up being a helpful correlate for life in general.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because our goal is to move through life being resistant to life, like building up our resistance to life so that we can live better in the world. And so we need to be able to take the hits that come. We need to be able to do the heavy lifting. And in that way, maybe not resistant to, but resilient in. That's really probably a better word. But we want to build up our resilience so that we can do more and take on more in the world. There's this scripture in the Old Testament that talks about how they should like build markers or altars along their path to remember. And this is something that our entire lives since we first moved to Iraq has been so important to me, is building these markers so that I can remember God's faithfulness, so I can remember my strength, so that I can remember what we have endured, because that helps me know what is endurable. And the more that I push and stress test those things and put that next marker in the ground, the more resilient I'm becoming. But what makes building that resiliency a game rather than a chore is knowing how to get the recovery right, because you don't have to carry the pain from being resilient for months, because you don't have to be so resilient that you burn yourself out. You can slowly stress test and build your resilience using recovery to make sure that you come back from it well, and then you can go again and take on the next big step in front of you. And it doesn't matter if this is your job or parenting or mountain climbing or weightlifting. It's all the same applied theory that gets the same results no matter what you're doing, that is building up that resilience and willingness to press into the resistance.
After 20 years in the Middle East, living and working across multiple wars, conflicts, genocides, do you think that people can be more and or less prepared for the worst?
Absolutely.
Because I don't know, I'm just kind of mindful of, like, as we do, we're always blurring these lines of like personal wellness and then this cultural milieu that we swim in, which is marked by, in our case, very overt and acute conflict. But even in the United States right now, this feeling that we're like sliding away from democracy, and some people, experts say, sliding into fascism, and some people really fear sliding into even nuclear Armageddon. So in that context, like, I don't think I'm just getting stronger just to get stronger as some vanity project. I don't think I'm trying to put on muscle just to get, jacked for some vanity project. I see an overall utility and context for what we're doing. But then I think, well, what's the inverse of that? We're our friends across Iraq and Syria and Lebanon. I don't know if should is the right word, but should. Was there an opportunity to, at least for individuals or society as a whole, I don't know how you even ask the question, like, if displacement is coming, if war is coming, have we just gotten lazy? Maybe that word's offensive, but have we just gotten relaxed?
We've gotten comfortable.
As a society, comfortable with the idea that none of this could ever come home to us. Like, we are inherently immune to these kinds of things. So why do we need to train? Most people only ever train for war. What we're essentially talking about here is also training for peace.
I think it's more difficult to train for peace. I think it's more difficult to teach yourself to sit in discomfort that you don't have to sit in, and be able to listen to ideas that you don't want to listen to, be able to sit with people that you don't necessarily like, be able to metabolize all the news of what's going on in the world because you want to be informed, not because it's being forced on you, and do it in a way that doesn't destroy your well-being. There's something to being able to endure the bombs when they're falling, but there's something else to being able to endure the maybe softer things of life that can still provide a lot of resistance to what would be the easiest way to live. So why don't we go through like some practical steps? What are your favorite ways to do recovery?
Well, I will say that I've had to learn to sleep a lot more. At probably the height of the war years here, we may be moving into a new peak of war across the Middle East, but in the past iteration, at the peak of those years when we were helping, the most people per year, pushing through the most millions in our humanitarian work, I was accustomed to sleeping, I don't know, I'd guess like 5 hours a night, something like that, give or take. And then trying to like catch up on the weekends, maybe like sleeping in and thinking that somehow that could account for or catch up from a week of 4 to 5 hours a night, 6 hours a night maybe. And when you start adding not just the mental stressors and the kind of the broad and acute anxieties of like being in war zones and seeing dead bodies on the ground, you start adding to that physical tears in your muscles and stress on your nervous system from the gym. And you can I guess I became aware of my body in a way that I was never aware really before. Like I wasn't that aware of my appetites. I had them, but I wasn't that aware of them. I ate fairly instinctually and could be very blown about, just based on the activities of the day or whatever. And so I didn't have any sense of like discipline around food, nourishment, which I now understand to be part of recovery. And I had to learn to sleep more. Like I couldn't just stay up until 2 on staff meetings or whatever, because we're in the Middle East and a lot of our team have always been in the US. And so the clocks overlap or don't overlap that much. And so, I would often shut down the office on the West Coast if that's what was needed from my home in Iraq, which would keep me up till 1, 2, 3, just depending. So I wasn't recovering physically, and I knew that I needed to start sleeping a lot more if I was going to recover physically. And then I just started, like, my body was hungry for sleep after 17 plus years of not. Turns out my body was kind of interested in having more rest. And that became like an interesting warning, and, once you start doing something or you acquire something or you take an interest in something, you start seeing it everywhere. And then I started seeing more studies about how sleep deprivation, has really negative long-term health outcomes. And so sleep stopped being a thief of productivity, which is how I used to see it before, and sleep in some ways stopped being in some ways, we can come back to this comment, but it stopped being a threat that I would miss something. Because if I'm sleeping, then what happens if something breaks out and I'm not around to so let's limit the window that I'm unavailable to roughly the same hours that the rest of the US team is unavailable. And then I'll be back up at 7 or 8. And then if something's going down, so there was like kind of a heightened hyper awareness or like alertness that something was always about to pop off. And so, anyway, it stopped being those things and it started being more rejuvenative and part of regeneration, generation in the sense of like creating something. It became important.
I wonder how much of your journey to sleep better, I wonder this because I think it's true of me, also took a kind of surrender that things were just going to be happening. News was still coming out while you sleep, and it would wait. Like whatever's going on is going to wait. It's almost a like surrendering to take ourselves quite so seriously, such that we could allow ourselves rest.
Yes. So I started down the sleep journey, the positive sleep journey, about, I don't know, I'd guess maybe 6-ish months, 4 to 6 months before we were ultimately fired from our last organization that we founded and grew. And so I had some really positive experience with sleep, and I was already starting my weight training journey and all that. And so I was seeing the benefits and some of my responsibilities and things like that I was able to set aside. And so I was in a really, really good place in a lot of ways. And then we were fired very abruptly, in a way that did not seem to align with any factual basis for the case, and was in direct contravention of so many things that were out there. And that night of being fired, we went to sleep and woke up the next morning to headline news articles that we had been fired and disgraced and all this stuff. And it was in a way that I didn't understand for maybe years. It was maybe the single most disruptive thing to my health, and in particular my sleep, that I have ever experienced in my entire life, with the most long-ranging psychological and bodily effects of probably anything negative that has ever happened to me. That night, going to sleep, thinking that we were engaged in something private with our board of directors, and waking up to a feeling of deep, deep betrayal and lies being peddled through media, and then the fallout through social media. It would take me a really long time to understand why I didn't sleep through the night again after that night for 3 years.
How have you built up your resilience now such that you can sleep through the night? Like what has shifted? Is it just distance, or do you think if you found yourself in the same similar media situation, you would still fall back into that old pattern of not sleeping and, waking up wondering what someone has said?
I don't know. And I'm not particularly keen to find out, but, I've talked about this before, but I think, just broadly, I had lived by this rule that if you do the right thing, it's going to work out. You're all going to be okay. It's a ridiculous lie. It's a silly fairy tale that, we tell kids. But it was my fairy tale, and it had enabled me to take a lot of risk in life and do a lot of things. And for that, I'm actually grateful. I mean, I don't regret living by that fairy tale in a lot of ways. It was an amazing, amazing journey. And I think in a lot of ways, we made it so much further in life than a lot of people get to make it before that fairy tale is shattered. Some people see it shattered when they're 5 or 6 years old. Some people get to make it until they're 42, 43 before it's shattered. And so I'm immensely grateful that we got to live by that silly dream, because it just produced so much amazing fruit and fun. It's like plot armor to just think that if you're on the right side of history, or you're living right, that everything's going to be okay in the end. And it is okay in the end, but it didn't mean that there wasn't going to be horrific valleys to have to walk through. So with that background, I would just say that that nightmare, it resulted in literal nightmares for a long time. And you asked how recovering or resilience, for a while it was just a kind of escape. Like I wasn't recovering, I wasn't getting better, but I had to escape the nightmares just to survive it. I had to escape so my escape was podcast. Like I remember after the end of that first year when my Spotify Wrapped came out, I don't remember the number, but it was an insane number of hours that clearly amounted to more than 8 hours a day of listening to podcasts. So it was basically my entire night plus whatever time in the gym or whatever else, plus whatever time out walking. I mean, it was an insane number of hours a day listening to podcasts. And a lot of that I was conscious for. A lot of that I would end up, not being fully conscious for because the podcast would help put me back to sleep. And it's actually one of the reasons why I finally accepted the call to start a podcast, because just that that sense of like familiarity and friendship. It's kind of silly. None of those people on the other side of my earbuds knew me. They weren't offering communal kind of environments or engagement, but they were so comforting, and there's a familiarity that comes with earbuds in your ear, and an intimacy. And I just like, there are some people who whispered me through that valley, and totally changed my life without ever knowing my name or having any concept of what role they played. And, so I didn't expect to feel this when I said that, but that was a big part of my, I don't know if it was resilience or recovery, but it was definitely just what I needed to kind of get through.
Almost like recognizing that you didn't want your own thoughts in those quiet moments, and that you wanted some other positive thoughts constantly feeding you.
For me, I am not someone who beats myself up. I don't deal in shame. I don't deal much in second guessing. So it wasn't so much my thoughts. It was other people's thoughts, which frankly, for most of my life, I haven't really dealt too much in worrying about other people's thoughts either. I'm a very mission-driven, value-driven, vision-driven person, and I never want to trample on anyone else's autonomy. I never want to trample on anyone else's well-being. But if I can feel like I'm on mission and pursuing the vision and upholding values that, I believe in, at least, and, I think the values I would espouse are generally universal values, then I don't get thrown off track by what other people are saying. I had not, up until that point, ever really dealt with getting thrown off track. But when I felt like that what I called that myth, that shield, that plot armor was then punctured, I was only left in a lot of ways with the words of others, almost none of which were actually said to us. They were just litigated in the media. And so, and then from there, it was, at least for me, it was easy to like extrapolate out a level and have another level of of voices. So I don't remember what you asked, but it just seemed maybe important or appropriate to say that.
I was just talking about the kind of media that you were listening to.
Yeah, it wasn't my voices that were haunting. It was other people's voice. My voice that was haunting. It was other people's voices. But yeah, a lot of what I listened to was mindset oriented podcasts. A lot of it was fitness oriented stuff. And things to just kind of put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's such a good tool to share here. And I think even sharing that story and sharing, the earth shattering breaking for us that if you do good things will come. It's important for this community to know, acknowledge and talk about, because as things become more difficult, as more people are needing to take stands, that public pushback is just going to increase. And it's the hardest part of being a peacemaker is that both sides will look at you and think that you're on the other side, right? Both sides will look at you and think you're not on their side because you're trying to hold so much nuance and so much space that common ground and peace can grow up out of that, because you're essentially removing yourself from the fight to say, how do we solve this, rather than getting stuck in the tit for tat of who's right and who's wrong. And so it's really easy to be mistaken, and having those tools to absolutely know for yourself that you're in your integrity and be able to move forward with that, with some encouragement from particular podcasts or music or books, I think it's helpful. It's a really helpful tool to move forward.
And I think this is where the recovery language is helpful, not just the rest language. We had, we had some good friends come alongside us, and in some ways they took a different point of view on what our next steps should be. There were some that were a little bit more of let us help you move into the next thing. And then there were some who were a little more you have to just go sit on the sidelines for a while. And it's hard. You're not allowed to start again. It's too early to start again. And, both are valid. Both have valid kind of correlates back to where we started this conversation, physical matters, weightlifting, strength training, injury. We were in a massive car accident a couple of months ago that laid us all up for a while. And we had doctors, brain specialists telling us, you cannot enter back in, yet you must sit on the sidelines. So there's a legitimacy to that perspective. But recovery is helpful to me because it says, like I said before, recovering toward something. At least that's how I wield it. I'm not just recovering from something to get back to some kind of baseline and then just stay at that baseline. I'm recovering for something, again, in the sense of strength training and stuff, because I want to get better. Something went wrong something went wrong with the thing that we built over 17 years. I don't exactly know what it was, but I don't want it to happen again. And so whatever role I can play in getting better at managing complex community, at leading through crisis, at whatever, I want to get better.
Yeah.
And so recovering forward, recovering for something. I don't know how, and maybe this is something that needs to be explored, but I don't know how to just rest and have no point or no goal. Like, I am a forward-oriented person. I want to move forward. I want to get better. I want to grow in every aspect of life, inside and out. And so, just like the doctors told us after the crash, basically your body's going to throttle you and hold you back in some ways. I think that happens kind of psychologically. That can happen psychologically and emotionally as well. Like there are some periods of recovery time that have to play themselves out, and you can't necessarily microwave and fast track some of that.
Yeah. It's for the long haul. And so when you say forward looking, I think rest is rest for the sake of rest, even when it's forward looking, because we have to be preparing no matter who we are in life, no matter how we choose to engage, we have to keep ourselves preparing for the long haul, for whatever's to come. And it really does make the rest more purposeful, more enjoyable whenever it has a purpose, whenever it has a direction that it's headed. And one of the things that I think about when I think about rest is I don't want to survive life. Mm-hmm. I have lived among people who have been through the absolute worst and they're just surviving. And then I have been with their brother or sister who have been through that same situation, and they have decided to recover. Mm-hmm. And it really is a mental choice, which feels harsh to say, but I don't mean it harshly. I just mean that everyone has to come to a point where they decide, I am going to be the victim and be the survivor, or I am going to create my future. I'm going to create my destiny, and I'm going to become the overcomer. And those who decide to recover and become something new, those are the ones who make it. And so I don't think that we can have the impact on the world that we want to as individuals and as a community here at the Department of Peace unless we decide ahead of time, no matter what happens, I'm going to find that restoration. And I'm going to be more than a survivor, and that, like, I have said this repeatedly, but what we do with the small things, we're going to do with the huge things. And we have to put that practice in every single day. So for me, recovery and rest is something I feel out in myself every day. Wake up, figure out, did I get enough rest last night? Did I get enough sleep? What's on my plate to do today? How can I schedule my day so that I can do those things to my absolute best ability? What can I take off my plate today that maybe doesn't need to be done if I feel like I need a bit more time for recovery? And my way of going about this is so different from your way of going about things. You're super disciplined. The things you have scheduled and from day to day, you're just going to get done and move through, and your recovery almost works on your time. Whereas mine is maybe a gentler process, where I really am listening to my needs every day, getting the things I need to get done, but also being really aware of what are my limits and where does that recovery come in and what do I need to recover. And so as I think about some of the ways that I recover, one thing that I learned through the ISIS war years was that sleeping, watching TV, those aren't the most restorative things for me. I need rest. I need a lot of sleep, actually. And so I get that sleep. But the more restorative things in me are like getting out on water. And for a long time, it was my habit every weekend. And sometimes midweek, I'm just going to the water. I'm going to drive. I'm going to take my paddleboard, and I'm just going to immerse myself in something that is so much bigger than me. that I can't help but gain perspective on all of the things I've absorbed. When something terrible has happened, or I've been with people who have been through something terrible, I need to come home or sit in the car or do something quiet so that I can remind myself that I'm a conduit of everything that I'm holding. I'm not a vessel. I don't exist to hold the negativity of the world. I don't exist to hold the pain and suffering that someone's going through. I'm just a conduit. I am just the electric line that moves from that person to the universe, to God, because that's something that God has to handle. That's not something I can deal with, but I have to take that moment and actually remind myself I am the conduit, and like let go, take the lid off and let it pass through me. And how beautiful and lucky am I that I get to be that conduit for so much, that I get to hold it and allow other people to release it onto me. But then I have to remember that I need to release it too.
I was going to ask you about that, and maybe that's your answer, but there was a time, I don't know, 10 years ago, where the pain of this world around us, the stress of this world around us, people at war, people displaced from war, people you cared about, people you didn't know and really care about by name, but you cared about by concept, who were suffering, it was overwhelming. And maybe there's multiple kinds of overwhelm. I don't know. For you, it wasn't overwhelming in a way that would completely, it wouldn't necessarily stop you from getting up the next day, or maybe not taking more than one day off, but it would overwhelm you in the sense of like come in the door and crash, like into bed, skip dinner, crying. So I guess the question is, what has changed? Has the world around us changed, or has the world in you changed?
Absolutely, 100% the world in me has changed. I've learned to hold less. I've learned to feel responsible for less in a really positive way. I've learned to let other people be responsible for the things they're responsible and not always feel like I need to swoop in and fix it. I'm a bad swooper. And so I've had to put some parameters around that, but also I have learned both internal tools and very like physical external things I can do with my body, with my hands, with my space that help me to metabolize all of it better.
What are some of those things?
Well, first I'll just say, like, this week has been hard. This week with bombs flying over our heads and increasing tensions globally, and this fear of nuclear war has been so much on me. And it has, like, every morning I wake up and I'm like, I do not want to do this. I don't even want to know what's coming because I have no power to change it. And it has taken me like 2 full hours every morning of sitting with better thoughts, of reminding myself where I do have power, and putting, like, finding my purpose in the problem, that to be able to metabolize it and be able to recover from it so that I can go do the other things that I have to do each day. But for me, I need almost like I need to do something physically with my hands. I need to craft something. I need to light a candle and meditate. The lighting the candle changes my whole atmosphere. And I've given it that power to do that. I know that, but it says this moment is sacred for this purpose, whatever I've sat down to do. And it is hugely, hugely, in ways I can't understand, helpful. It helps me understand why in all the ancient churches they have altars filled with candles, because setting that intention and knowing visibly from the flame that intention is being held and that's what that moment is for is so helpful for me. And so I'm even like, as I've started traveling more, taking a candle with me, because it's such a healing thing for me to be able, in whatever atmosphere I am, wherever I am, just light that candle and set the intention and meditate, pray, and move through whatever it is that I'm trying to metabolize in that moment. I think that we have found walking to be really helpful not so easy to do in the heat of summertime in Iraq, but walking together instead of like watching TV together. When we walk together, it's so much more restorative, both for our relationship and we do this. We kind of help each other heal in those conversations, and I think it's like co-regulating together is really helpful. And then I think maybe one of the most important things I've learned is how to catch myself before I need to go into a cave. It's like, this is getting too much. I feel it. I feel it in my heart, in my chest. I can feel like my eyes trying to go numb. And when I get there, I now know now is the right time to take that little time out. Even if it's a 5-minute timeout, put my phone down, go move around the house to do something, go make a fancy drink in the kitchen, like something to just give myself that little moment of I matter here. I'm going to self-regulate what's going on. And then I'm going to jump back into it again, because it all has purpose. I wish I could jump in a lake every time that it happened. That's not possible, but I still take advantage of that every chance I get.
Yeah. You've done an amazing job of discovering those tools, and then I think the discipline of, knowing how to roll out those tools to avoid the spiral, to avoid the collapse. I think for a while there was because we'd never known any different. We got married, we moved overseas, and then pretty quickly found ourselves in, within 30, 45 minutes of the front lines of a war zone. And then that just kind of was our life for 17 years. And so we took upon ourselves within the first couple of years of marriage, like some of the most incredible stressors that you could ever imagine, willingly. And I think the willingly part was important because it made it so much easier to handle and cope with than if it had been thrust upon us. But even though we did it willingly, it was still a part of our life, life without electricity and suicide bombings and kidnap threats and, just kind of the pervasive stressors of a country that had been decimated by war and then was actively being decimated by war. That, we hadn't lived that much life with each other, and we hadn't had kids until we had them in the context of these kinds of stressors. So you're learning to be a mom. I'm learning to be a dad. We're learning it in a culture where the norms and stuff around some of that were very different than our own. So it's reinforcing old gender roles and old gender dynamics that, I was already probably religiously predisposed to adopting anyway, which put more stress on you. And so our career paths end up, being a little bifurcated and taking different shape, which put more stress on you. And then it had me being exposed and out among things that you weren't a part of. And so when you started collapsing in some ways under the weight of the world, neither of us really knew any better. Neither of us had coaches or mentors or community who had lived through, experienced, transcended, risen above, integrated, and then could reach back and help us make it through. We were either surrounded by just ourselves or other kind of peers, basically, who were all figuring it out as we went. And everyone handled it differently, but one of the things that I remember thinking and believing about you was that it was just at once a beautiful kind of representation or culmination of your deep empathy for the world and your ability to feel for others and your desire to kind of take on and bear the pain and the suffering of others. And like an unfortunate consequence or or shadow or whatever that just kind of your Achilles heel or whatever that just kind of has to be endured because that's who you are. And it's been amazing to see you move through that, still stay the kind of empathic, open-hearted, deep, service-oriented person that you are while shedding so much of that shadow and no longer giving yourself away to the point of self-depletion. You serve your community, you serve adjacent communities, and you reach in a way that aims to serve all of us globally, but you've learned to do it in a way that doesn't collapse in on itself. You don't do it at the expense of yourself. You don't do it at the expense of your own people anymore. And I think that makes you so much better equipped to pursue that highest order vision that you have, to truly build a world where everyone rises, to build a world for all of us. And I think it's taken, maybe it could have happened faster. I don't know how we know those things, but I don't regret the journey that we've taken to get to this place where we can look back and go, wow, it used to be like that. Yeah. And now it's like this.
Thank you for saying that. And I think part of it is being freed from the idea that being good means only good things will come to you. That break of, I have been a good girl for 42 years. Yeah. I have been nice to everyone. I have tried only with others' interests in mind, to the point of putting myself, like, completely depleting myself. And it didn't work. It doesn't work. If you're out there still thinking it works, it doesn't work. And having that shattered, and then like understanding my faith through that different lens, and actually seeing that all of my faith heroes, every one of them, died or endured something horrific, no matter how righteous, no matter how good, no matter how much they did what they were supposed to do, what God would have them do. It's written in the American theology books. It's not written, I don't think, in like the stories of our faith heroes. And realizing that, and I was like, wow, I missed this truth for a really long time. It was such an important pivotal moment for me, because now I'm done with the shoulds and the oughts, and I'm not acting out of what I should do or what social media says is the right thing to do for social justice today. I just get to honor my own intuition and honor the neighbors around me and what they need, and how I can help in the ways that they're asking for help. And I'm not listening to all those other voices who say, no, you can't do it that way, or you have to do it this way, or if you're going to be a good ally, you have to do that, or that's so much weight to carry. And it has no place in this community, because we don't know what is right for this person to follow their intuition and be a peacemaker in their community. We can't know for that person. And so we can't say the right way for you to be an ally is this, or you have to go protest, or you can't go protest, or, whatever the rules of the day may be, they can't apply here, because we have to have the freedom to go and move in the way that brings the most peace to our communities, and not the kind of peace that just like closes everyone's mouth, but a true peaceful living enjoyment in relationship with those around us, the kind that's building up the kind of foundation that we want, but growing up into that after breaking, like growing up into that kind of perspective. I think that's what has helped me. It's been another really important part of me becoming more resourced, because I don't have those voices and those echoes in my head in the same way. Not only was I trying to be helpful, not only was I trying to bring healing and access and food and jobs, but I was trying to conform myself to do it in a way that would be acceptable to everyone. But then you wake up one day and you realize everyone's not here. Those people are not in my community. They're not talking to the people I'm talking to. And there's a story that always comes to mind when I say this about someone who wanted so badly for me to buy a house for one of my refugee friends. And they were like, well, I'm never giving again if you don't buy this house for them. And when I talked to my friend about did they want a house, their response every time was no. No, why would I want a house here? I don't want to live here. I want to go home. I'm waiting till I can go home. That's home. This isn't home. And I don't know why it didn't click so fully in my heart in that moment, in that story. But knowing what I know now and looking back to all the times that someone out there who wasn't here was trying to tell me how to do my job here. And those who I was serving were telling me that's not how they wanted the job done. I just finally free of all of those expectations. And I'm just living the life that has been put before me, saying whatever that next yes is, taking advantage of whatever that next yes is to help the community I'm a part of.
It's interesting where we've ended up in a conversation about recovery and rest, that, ultimately one of the tools in recovery, or one of the things that you've articulated needing to recover from, is like the stress and expectations of others. There's this notion of like, I don't worry. I think what we've learned is not to worry about the expectations and opinions of people that we don't really want to be like. Like there are people, that we have a responsibility for. And those voices matter in the context of whatever that thing is for which we have responsibility for them, employment or, whatever else. But like in the grand scheme of what kind of life are we building? What kind of life are we pursuing? What strategic decisions are we making that affect the outcomes of major things, including ourselves? Like, I concern myself most with the voices of people that I really respect. And now. And it was easy in past days to let other voices into our head and take up mind share, when really those weren't people that we respected and wanted to model really any aspect of our life or living after.
Yeah.
And so there's from a recovery standpoint, there's not all voices, not all input needs to stress us the same. So in this resistance training, series, and the overall concept here, there's really 3 parts of what it takes to grow and get better, get stronger, or whatever. Stress, adaptation, and recovery. Or some people say stress, recovery, adaptation, like the recovery brings the adaptation. But the stressor, we started this conversation is like the weight room, or, learning to run 2 miles, not 1 mile, pushing yourself just a little bit more every day. And then the recovery, nutrition, sleep, other things that we've talked about here are part of how you give your body time to then adapt. The adaptation is like leveling up just a little bit. And then you repeat it all again the next day in the gym. You stress your body a little bit more, you go on a recovery process, and then you adapt. Then you stress yourself, you recover, you adapt. And I think that's true of life, it's true of relationships, it's true of professional growth, it's true of entrepreneurship, it's true of living in conflict and war. Like, everyone around us has gotten a lot better at dealing, like literally around us in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, everyone has gotten a lot better at, people always say, oh, they're so resilient. And there's a truth to that. But that's a resiliency that's been built up over time of outside stressors or inside stressors, finding that it doesn't destroy you, and then adapting to that as a new kind of normal, strengthening your psyche, strengthening your spirit, strengthening your faith, slowing down your metabolism because there's not enough food, whatever it is. And then going back out again, and it's more airstrikes, and it's more genocide, and it's more whatever. And so you just get a little bit better coping with it, is like one way to understand living through hard times like this. And I think while we certainly don't want anyone, we don't want these wars and these extreme outside stressors to ever be visited upon any of us. We do want to think about how we can apply what we've learned over 20 years of doing this, so that all of us can just become a little bit more planned, resilient for whatever life is going to throw at us. Because I do have my non-alarmist fears that there's a lot more that could yet come.
Yeah. Well, I have 3 tips for trying to figure out
Let's do it.
Rest or recovery. The first one is to notice. Take time to notice what drains you and what restores you. So you don't want to focus too much on one or the other, right? You want to notice them as they're coming, because what restores you may shift as your life shifts. And what's possible for you to do for restoration may shift as your life changes. And so it's good to always have that awareness. It might start with setting an alarm on your phone 3 times a day, just to notice, just a little reminder for you, not something that everybody else needs to know about, but just a little reminder. I'm going to stop 3 times a day, and I'm just going to notice how I'm feeling, and if there's something small and restorative that I could do in that moment. The next one is to experiment with your rhythms, not just those moments. So get good at it in the moment, and then set up some rhythms. Sometimes things in life are happening at such a pace that you can't do the same thing every Monday, right? Or the same thing every Saturday. Maybe a parent has gotten sick, and it's a lot to try and figure out how to restore from, because you're helping them every single moment of every single day. So what does it look like to set up life rhythms that lead to restoration? That it can look so vastly different for everyone, but hopefully that will give some freedom, that we're not looking for a every Monday night bubble bath. But what if it's a weekly bubble bath that nobody else can invade that time? It's something you can count on, and you can just keep holding out for that time. And then you can make it as restorative as possible with the things that are most important to you. Maybe it's a weekly sauna or something like that. And then the last thing is protect what restores you. And I think that this is important, because it can be as easy as saying to the people around you, hey, I need this. Hey, friend, roommate, husband, I need an hour a week to myself to have a bath. I need 4 hours on Saturday morning while the kids are watching cartoons and whatever else. I need 4 hours to go on a walk or to go hike, or I need our whole family to go to the lake, at least once a month, because that's going to be really restorative to me. But when you can communicate what you need, the people around you can help you get that, so that you're not the only one fighting for your restoration, but you're all working together to feed into a more restorative household. And imagine when we get that figured out, when we figure out the restorative household, how that can expand to our neighborhood, to our communities, and beyond.
What do you think about so much of everything you just said is rooted in individualism? That's the default setting for most people, is to see this as a me thing, me time, my agenda, my recovery, my fitness, whatever. And that's great. It is. What does it take, or what do you think, how do we go beyond just that me level of existence? And how do we do a more communal resistance training? Even going out to the family level, or what does it look like to go out to a neighborhood level? I mean, dare I say, what does it look like to go out to like your house of worship, sort of church, mosque, temple, synagogue level? Can a neighborhood be more fit, resilient, nourished? I mean, certainly some of those things, yes, for a lot of structural reasons. Can a city, can a nation be more prepared because it really set itself? Or when you start to go beyond that me, then some people are like, oh, that's whatever, communism, or, like you're trying to push your agenda. I don't know, like what are the dynamics of that? Because I would love to finish this conversation affirming everything that we just said about the personhood and the individual journey, but how do we take it to the next level? You're going to hear that there's 1,000 different fitness podcasts that you can listen to that are going to do that way better than we can. Part of what makes us unique, part of what makes the Department of Peace unique is while we are affirming all that, we are also trying to affirm that I am part of a we.
I think the importance, of course, all of this can be done on whatever scale people are interested in doing it, but it has to remain invitational. The very moment that it becomes a codified expectation,
that's good.
We lose all the restorative qualities of it. Yeah. If you want to go to the gym and I don't want to go to the gym, even if I come because you want me to go to the gym, my gym time is going to be terrible. I'm probably actually not going to achieve very much because my brain already doesn't want to be there. If I want to go to the lake and it's the last thing that you want to do because you need to rejuvenate a different way, for me to drag you with me, it's not helpful. If I ask you to come and you voluntarily, like you actually want to be there, that's totally different. Then it probably could be restorative for you too. So I think, how could we present these opportunities to our community, to our larger family? What if the family get together didn't have to be, we're all going to sit at the table and talk about politics because we actually don't know one another well enough to talk about some other topic, and everyone is traditionally expected to know about these topics that we're choosing. What if the whole family did something else? Maybe food's involved, but maybe it's taking place at a different, less controversial spot, since the dinner table has become a little controversial with larger family gatherings. What does a neighborhood block party look like, and how could that be a kind of rejuvenation for others? But once you understand the science between co-regulating, it's pretty unbelievable what humans can do for one another. It's totally different from being codependent, but our presence with one another, the way that it can bring healing to each other is remarkable, and we're not taking advantage of it because we're focusing way too much on the individual. And when we realize how tied up our wellness is with the guy we're walking next to, regardless of if we know them or not, the more serious we're going to get about caring for the other person's wholeness.
I love that. Well, look, if any of this is interesting to you, if you haven't watched the other episodes of our resistance training series, would love to invite you further into this conversation. Of course, go back and listen to the other episodes if you want to. But even more than that, we'd love to have you join the Department of Peace. We're not a fitness community or anything like that by any means. We are training for peace. This resistance training idea is really born out of our own lived experiences in places of war and declining democracy and sliding into fascism and things like that, where we have nothing but to admit the world is heavy, and we want to be stronger to carry it together and carry it for each other, and really continue to have the strength that we need inside and outside to build a world for all of us, to build a world where everyone rises. That's the Department of Peace. That's what we're inviting you into. So if you want to belong to a community that is pushing each other forward toward peace on the inside and the outside of life, both, for our individual lives, but also for our collective lives, we'd love to have you as a member. Scroll down or click below or find us at joindop.com, and love for you to become a member today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.